Good morning, student. My name is Shivam Mishra, and we are going to discuss the economic survey. There was various data and news related to the economic survey and their outcomes of the reports. So we need to. I thought to make a video, a separate video, where we can discuss whole highlights of the economic survey, which has been prepared by the Department of Economic Affairs, which comes under the Ministry of Finance. Yesterday, also, while doing the newspaper analysis, we saw various articles related to uh, economic survey, and there were some data also based on economic survey. So these are the things we had yesterday discussed it, but there were many things we left behind. So I thought to make a separate video so that we can uh, discuss the whole economic survey and the part of it. So let's get started. There was a highlight where it advocates, the economic survey advocates for delaying strict financial targets. Strict financial targets, which has been uh, formed by a legislation act of the government that is called Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management FRBM Act. Under the FRBM Act, government puts various targets related to revenue deficit, fiscal deficit, how much money a government or the state should borrow, what percent of GDP is safe for borrowing, thus overall making an sustainable fiscal health in the country. So there were many data related to fiscal deficits, revenue deficits, which has been presented under the FRBM Act. But but the timeline which has been decided for those targets have been breached continuously. We have seen that there were various amendments into that act, thus making or delaying those targets. And thus the economic survey uh, comes out with a highlight that we it it advocated for delaying the strict financial targets, because the targets were made although basis on the practical and informative data, but still they were so ideal that it was not possible to meet those targets, and that is why it becomes difficult to achieve those targets. And thus the economic survey discuss it that we need the flexibility in the targets, flexibility in targets, because we have witnessed various geopolitical tensions. We got various economic headwinds. We got natural disasters. So these things create an overburdening over the government and of course on the economy. And because of that, these conditions most of the time the fiscal targets have been reached. The survey highlights that the center's fiscal deficit, which is spiked, central's fiscal deficit, it has increased to 9.2% of GDP in 2021. Is projected to be 4.4%. It was approx more than double. The target which has been given by the FRBM is 4.4%, but we got 9.2% of GDP as our fiscal deficit by the end of current financial years, with aligning with the finance minister's commitment to halve the deficit in 5 years. Despite the FRBM Act's fiscal deficit target of 3% of GDP by 2020 being repeatedly deferred. The survey argues that against reinstating these targets due to uncertain global environment and emphasizing the need for policy freedom. The survey also notes that 3% fiscal deficit target has been achieved only once since the FRBM Act enacted. It was enacted in 2003, and the article talks about that since the formation of this act, we have able to achieve this 3% fiscal target only at once, which eroded the India's fiscal credibility, but recent fiscal prudence has restored trust among the financial market and credit rating agency. So if you are not abiding by your acts, if you are not achieving the targets, it erodes as a financial institutions of India. And but the recent fiscal prudence has restored that trust, restored that credibility, and and that we can say by upgradation of upgradation in ranking of India from BB minus 2, I guess it was made BBB through the credit rating agencies. By upgradation of these credit ratings agencies, the borrowing can be can become easier for government of India. That is in very nominal interest rates. And thus this economic survey talks about that we need to keep the practical targets by considering taking into consideration the global environment impacts, geopolitical issues, geopolitical tensions, economic headwinds, natural disasters. So we need to take these kind of points also considerations while calculating or while putting the targets on the fiscal basis. The next one was ethanol blending. There was an economic survey which was tabled in Parliament, highlights the non-trivial implication of ethanol blending program and increased maize cultivation on food security. Non-trivial implication. Article talks about non-trivial implications. Warning of potential increase in edible oil imports and food prices. Thus, the ethanol blending program and increased maize cultivation on food security. It warned of potential increase in edible oil imports because we'll not be able to produce or agriculturally produce much in the oil sector. So that that overall increases the oil import price. It will also lead to increase in food prices. The survey notes that in states like Maharashtra, Karnataka, maize cultivation is competing with the pulse because there was boost, there was given and there was an ambition of the targets of blending the ethanols into the petroleums. So in order to achieve those targets, farmers are producing more maize, and that is directly impacting the pulse production in these states, Maharashtra and Karnataka. There is also competition for the oil seeds like soya bean. There was competition with the cottons, without expected reduction in paddy acreage. That is, paddy is although has been cultivated on very vast areas and on very widely basis. So it is asking that the maize cultivations may not affect the paddy cultivation, but it is going to affect, it will impact the pulses productions, the oil seeds productions, the cotton productions, which will overall increase the consumption baskets prices in India. Survey warns that this shift could increase India's dependence on edible oil imports, because if we are not producing more oil seeds, we are mainly relying on the imports only, and that will lead to volatility in domestic food prices. Also, it so now we can understand the chronology that if there is an shift to ethanol based production, there will be, if there is increase into this, there will be increasing dependence on oil or imports, and what it will cause to volatility in domestic food prices. That will lead to supply shocks, which create tension between energy versus food. The ethanol blending program has achieved significant gains, saving India over 1.44 lakh crores in foreign exchange. Thus, the ethanol blending, although it's impacting on the imports of oils and other products, it has also helped in a reduction or savings of 1.44 lakh cr through foreign exchange rates by substituting approximately 245 lakh metric ton of crude oils. So there has been, this has replaced the crude oil imports. So the article further didn't discuss much about this, but it has suggested that we should make a balance between the energy and food. That one should be complementary on each other and should not dent to each other. The next was economic survey, where it confirmed uh, that although in India there was a increased in employment rate, there was increased in employment rate, thus directly means that unemployment rate has went down, according to that has been based by backed by the data of periodic labor force survey. So according to periodic labor force survey, there was a decrease in unemployment rate and there was an increase in job production. But the article shows concern that despite of increasing in employment rate, India faces the income volatility and financial inclusion. Thus, these are the point of concerns. And why this is happening? Because we got the lower skills, we got the low literacy rates, there is a digital divide. So these are can be considered as a, a point while writing our mains answer, that income volatility is because of skill gap, illiteracy, digital divide, lack of awareness. So these are the concerns which has been observed in the Indian economic market. But the article suggests that there should be an structural reforms. There should be an tax rationalization so that we can maintain the income. We can reduce the volatility in incomes. We should focus on skill development. The article suggests that in order to do that, the government has came with GST 2.0 reform. It came with four labor code recently amended and implemented in India. There was increase in women's participation rate, thus overall promoting more inclusive growth, and the gig economic issues where the the social security benefits were not available to gig workers that has been provided under the four labor codes. This has been the initiatives for the government to be for the more inclusive development. But still, government need to focus more on issues like gig workers, where they get kind of uh, an algorithmic workloads. There has been an income based on performance. There was a supply demand mismatch, and thus these creates an still and concern in the Indian economy, and that is need to be fixed with the time. Next article was about economic survey where it highlights the digital addiction, where people are getting more screen related mental health problems there, and which was especially observed in the children and adolescents, and suggest the intervention. Thus digital addictions which creates an screen related mental health problem plus other kind of problems like eye weakness. These have been problem due to the digital addictions, which has been especially observed in children and adolescents. And the article suggests that because of rising of these concerns, we should need to take the initiatives like cyber safety program so that the people cannot be trapped into the cyber securities. There should be an and cyber safety education proportion especially. We can educate in these sectors in those children so that they can be saved from any kind of threat to those things. We need peer mentor programs. We need parental awareness so that parents can use these kind of apps and restrictions so that the child cannot be get affected by those things. So this is the article talks about because of the increasing digital addictions, and that articles discuss it that during the COVID-19 pandemic that the people got more into work from home. Their people got confined at their one place, so most of the peoples were addicted to those mobile phones, especially games, videos, or other things. And there was a number of rise of cases in the mental health issues while after the COVID pandemic. So it suggests that we need to have a preventive care units. We need nutritional care because of Nutrition also, the mental health can be affected. We need the mental health counselors. So these things need to be promoted in order to address these kind of concerns which has been related seen. The articles also discuss about that the earlier government has came up with the program Teli Manas program. This was a program of government of India to address the mental health issues. There was a counselor under this which has been provided with the phone numbers, and public can directly reach to those peoples. So article talks about the Telemanas program and other programs which addresses the health issues can be upgraded or can be imbibed with other uh, other problems also, like digital addictions. It should integrate with the educational institutions and training of the counselors, so that it overall atmosphere can be created where the mental health issues can be checked, not only checked, but it can be lead to a solution also, because most of the peoples are young minds in India, and people are facing these kind of problems, and it should be uh, addressed with the government initiatives, so that we can uh, use our demographic dividends. We can use our people's populations as a asset, and it should and that will help us to achieve the Viksit Bharat targets of 2047. The article talks about that we got reduction in a drastic reduction in maternal mortality rate. There was a drastic reductions in infant mortality rate. The reduction was 86% approx in the maternal mortality rate. There was a decrease of 30 approx. There was 25 per thousand death in 2023. This is a milestone for India, and thus uh, these are things which shows that improving health conditions but deteriorating mental health conditions, which need to be checked with the time. The uh, other articles of economic survey was that the article the economic survey highlights that we need a mission oriented approach in a manufacturing sector. India needs to promote its manufacturing sectors because it will help in generating employment, it will boost productivity, it will enhance export, and also make the India an strategic resilience. Thus, in order to uh, get such kind of benefits, we need a mission to promote our manufacturing sectors. The survey suggests that manufacturing capacity should be considered as a strategic national assets. Strategic national assets, and and thus we need an economic transformation. We need we have to check the geopolitical uncertainty. This article's telling it that why we need a strategic nation asset. Why need to promote that India's manufacturing sectors, because there is an economic transformation all over the world. There is a privatization, deglobalization issues we have seen in the world right now, where the countries are putting more restrictions over the trade, and thus, in this kind of situations, we need an economic reforms. Especially, we need an self reliance. That is the government of India's program only still suggested that Nirbhar Bharat, and thus we need to achieve the Viksit Bharat 2047. There is economic transformation all over the world. Example, we have seen that deglobalization, tariff issues, trade related restrictions, we got the geographic and geopolitical uncertainty, wars, and conflicts. We got the tech change also. We are shifting from machine to robots. So there is a change in technology, and that is why we need to adopt these kind of things in order to utilize our and develop our manufacturing sectors that will contribute to employments, productivity, overall productivity of a country. It will enhance exports. It will strengthen the strategic resilience of India. The articles talks about that we should use MSME as our Brahmastra. What we say as a because of its significance only, we can say that MSME is a Brahmastra of India, which can help in boosting the manufacturing sector in India. Because the data itself will tell you that why the MSME are so significant. Through data, we can make out that MSME contribute to 35% approx to manufacturing sector. It contribute to 48.58% of exports. It contribute 31.1% of GDP, creating 7.47 CR enterprises. This is contributing or employing over 32.8 CR people. The data itself make it so informative that MSME is an horse of the India's manufacturing sector, and thus we need to promote it. It should be more formal. It should be export linked. Thus, we then to need to promote our manufacturing sectors. Thus, it will shift our industrialization from import to exports. It will focus on competitiveness. It will focus on innovation. Thus, overall strengthening the global value chain. This is what about economic survey of this manufacturing sectors. The next one is about agriculture and allied sectors. According to the economic survey presented in Parliament, agriculture and allied sectors average annual growth rate over the past 5 years was 4.4%. This is an average annual growth rate of the agriculture and allied sectors. And but it slowed at constant price, but it slowed in the second quarter of the 2025-2026. The decadal growth rate from 2015 to 2025 was 4.5%, 4.45%, highest compared to previous decades, driven by livestock growth at 7.1%, fishing and aquaculture growth at 8.8%, and crop sector as 3.5%. It also suggests that India's food grain production has increased, estimating over approx 36 3,600 lakh tons, which the higher output was seen in rice, wheat, and core cereals like maize, sorry, millet, bajra, sorghum. These are the core cereals, and thus there was a overall production of food production in India. Next one is PM Modi's speech, where he conveys a message of strength, commitment to democracy, and respect for democratic decisions during the budget session. He referred the FTAs between India and EU, which has been announced this week, as a sign of India's promising future, opening a vast market for Indian goods. It will have the last long-lasting impact over the both countries and the countries of both party, and thus consider it as a by winning of profits and hearts. This is this was the economic survey, the data which has been important. So I thought to discuss it on and to make a separate video on it. There was one more issues where the highlight a notable increase in number of countries from which India imports crude oil, as stated by Chief Economic Advisor. Until November financial year 2026, India saw significant increase in crude oil imports, that is from Libya, Egypt, US, Brunei, while the imports from Russia, Saudi Arabia, Iraq has decreased, and there was an increase of imports from these countries, and thus it is pointing out and diversification aligning with Delhi's new strategy. There was increased in UAE share from 9.4% to 11.1%. There was increase of Libya share, Egypt share, and Nigeria share also. And this was the highlights of the economic survey. There was one more uh, sector where it came up with the reports, like that is critical minerals. What are critical minerals? Critical minerals actually are those minerals, a list of those minerals. India has had a list of critical minerals which is 30 in number. We got a 30 minerals which are very critical for the India's economy, and that includes lithium, cobalt, nickel, copper, and rare earth elements. So the article talks about that these elements becomes an strategic choke points, because every country is running towards a low carbon economy, and from a high carbon economy or polluting economy to a low carbon and efficient and clean economy, these critical minerals contribute in a significant way. And that is why to have the energy security, to have the industrial competitiveness and geopolitical power, these minerals becomes an important asset for any country. There was and trade related restrictions on the export of critical minerals by source countries that highlights its geopolitical significance. Advanced economies are promoting standard based critical mineral market which focus on sustainability, traceability and governance, which compliance to substantial cost. Thus, the chief economic advisor identified these three challenges for developing countries. Three challenges for developing countries. These points can become an important for our main answer. The first one is high upfront and ongoing cost. High upfront and ongoing cost. The second one is narrowly defined or asymmetrically enforced standard, trapping them in low value supply chain segments. Thus, there is a narrow definition, there was asymmetrical enforcement of definitions. Asymmetrical enforce standard, which puts it into a low supply chain. Thus, there can be an accumulation of these minerals at some countries in a large basis, and the accumulation and there the other countries will be left with no minerals. And this was a point of concern that is a challenging issues, and that could be faced more by the developing or underdeveloped nations that economic advisors talks about. And he also talks about the increasing cost of these minerals due to the premiums without adequate support, because we every country had to work for their finance, they have to work in field of technology, they need to work on capacity building, and for overall economic growth these critical minerals becomes very much important. And that is why these challenges have been pointed by the economic advisors that would be possibly faced by these developing nations. And thus India have to uh, be have to diversify its trade related to critical minerals and rare earth elements. There was an highlights where it emphasized the need for India to focus on diversify exports towards higher value products. It asks for diversify of exports exports to a new destination in order to sustain export momentum. Why this came as a news? This as a highlight because we are facing a global uncertainty, global geopolitical conflicts. There are the situations of wars. Recently, we witnessed that Houthi rebels attacked the Red Sea and they choked the supply of goods which was moving from Asia and South Asia to European and Arab countries. And thus, these that is why the article talks about that we need to diversify our export destinations so that overall export does not get hampers. There was recently an US tariff hikes that impacted our exports in very uh, to very certain way. So this article talks about that we need the because the global currently the global trade environment has has adopted some characters, that is protectionism. Protectionism is about like one country is overwhelmingly protecting its domestic markets and does not or it either discriminate with the foreign companies, or either it didn't even allow also to those countries penetrating their goods into their country. And so there is a situation of protectionism. There is a recalibrated supply chain due to geopolitical shift, and there is a shift from multilateralism to bilateralism. There is increase of number of cases of FTAs in the overall world. There was which impact the overall global trade environment. Trade policy uncertainty is heightened. These uncertainties has been exacerbated by the protectionism which we already talked about. Protectionism, tariffs, strategic decoupling. Strategic decoupling means the one is opting out the pre-agreed or some agreement because of the because of their economic concerns. And this has been seen, the protectionism, tariffs, and strategic decouplings among the major economies. And thus, the article talks about that we need a trade policy certainty, because there was a trade policy uncertainty index and global economic policy uncertainty index, which peaked in April 2025 due to weakened regional and multilateral trade agreements and competition for the rare earth elements. So, India's trade strategy is supported by an expanding framework of FTAs and providing reliable markets, access, and global uncertainty. And thus, the article talks about this only, that we need to diversify our exports, especially related to high value products, so that even if there is a geopolitical tension or conflicts in one area, our export can move on to other areas. So overall, our exports does not get impacted, because of not only for from the global economic headwinds, but also from the geopolitical concerns. The next one is economic survey. There was an uh, there was an issue of unconditional cash transfer, especially to women, can be called at freebies. There was an election in Bihar, and the government came up with the announcements of transferring an amount of rupees in the bank account of people in order to promote the industrial or self-help group or employability. There are other state government schemes, central government schemes, where there was a unconditional cash transfers. There was a transfer of cash only to allurate the votes of the people. And thus the economic survey talks about that this will uh, not only it will cause the short term, but although it will help in short term benefits, but it will cause it have potential cause of long term fiscal sustainability issue and medium term growth challenge. The survey highlight that there was 1.7 lakh crore unconditional transfer of money, which has, and even there are states which have increased their unconditional transfer of money, where even the most of the states are facing the revenue deficits. And still, the government is also facing the revenue deficit. Revenue deficit is defined as if a revenue expenditure increases with revenue income. Revenue expenditures is expenditure of government's budget or government's money, especially to salaries of employees, interest payment over the previous loans. These are the revenue expenditure. Revenue income is tax and non-tax income of government, especially the income tax, corporate tax. There are fines. So these are considered as a revenue income. These are considered as a revenue expenditure. When revenue expenditure exceeds that, even the government cannot sustain its revenue expenditure. Even it cannot provide a salary to every people. Even it cannot make their payment of interest. So this revenue deficit conditions has a major setback over the any economy. And recently we have seen above in the above article where it talks about that we got the FRBM Act, which puts and targets over the government to reduce its revenue deficit. And the FRBM Act suggests that revenue deficit should be made to 0% of GDP. That we should be balancing our revenue expenditure to revenue income. This has been targeted, but still there has been a rise of revenue deficit, and we have seen a revenue deficit of approx 4 to 5% exactly. I don't know the data out of it. Thus, the article talks about that we need we need we, we need the clauses, we need the protections and periodic reviews of these kind of expenditures. The article also suggests that these unconditional transfers should be utilized for capital expenditure, should be invested on those products which are more stronger, durables, and can have a long-term impacts over the human resources. And this is there was also one highlight of the economic survey where it challenges in a livestock and fishery sectors, including feed and fodder shortage. Livestock and fisheries sector, the concern was feed and fodder shortage. Mainly reliance on limited export basket and infrastructure gaps. Despite these challenges, the livestock sector has shown significant growth in India, which CAGR of 12, the livestock growth, CAGR of 12.77%, and with the GVA of 195%. GVA means gross value added of 195%. It also identifies that feed and fodder shortage as the most critical constraint, as the growth of livestock has surpassed the expansion of fodder resources. So the concern is feed and fodder shortages and feed and fodder crisis, especially related to fisheries and livestock sectors. These have been the economic surveys highlights. Mm, Thus, this is all about the news or all about the economic survey, and there must be some other uh, highlights also which has been missing in this video. So if there will be any important highlights, I'll make a separate video out of it. But till now, this is an enough articles where we can summarize the overall economic conditions of our country. Thank you for watching.